I genuinely dislike making videos to correct other content creators' claim, especially so for emotionally charged issues like human genetics. But considering the fact that I have raised my contention in the most cordial manner possible, and after double checking the academic sources on this issue, I raised it again in a slightly more assertive manner. Yet the content creator insists on his misinformation. So here I am making this video. The channel in question is OTR Food and History on YouTube, and the video is this: the history of noodles. It was an enjoyable watch, truth be told, and I learned a lot from this hour-long documentary. However, early on in the video, the content creator made a claim that happens to touch on a subject that I paid a bit of attention to. Now watch this.
The people of this vast landscape were from a culture known as the Qijia, whose ancestors had lived across the region since at least the 5th millennium BC, having migrated from the Caucasus through Central Asia.
You caught it? He claimed that the people of Qijia culture migrated from the Caucasus some 7,000 years ago. In more technical terms, he is basically claiming that the people of Qijia culture has steppe-related ancestry, commonly identified with Y haplogroup R1b, R1a, and to a smaller extent Q1a. This ancestry is also correlated with the spread of the Indo-European languages. You see, people don't just randomly migrate around the world. To exploit a new environment, a few vital achievements need to be unlocked. These can be technological, like irrigation or animal husbandry, but sometimes may even require genetic adaptation. For example, persistent lactose tolerance is required before a society can adapt to a pastoral lifestyle, or genetic adaptation for high altitude living before a society can prosper on the Tibetan plateau. For reasons not entirely clear yet, perhaps a combination of the above factors, starting from about 5,000 years ago, people with this steppe ancestry would aggressively spread out from their homeland in the Pontic Caspian region, roughly corresponding to modern Ukraine and southern Russia. These people settled as far west as Western Europe and went as far east as Central Mongolia. A branch of this expansion also went southwest into India, syncretized into the Vedic culture. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people with steppe ancestry or speakers of the Indo-European languages did not migrate into territories within modern China. On the contrary, in fact, you have ethnic groups recorded by ancient Chinese that clearly spoke Indo-European languages in Western China, like the Sakas, the Usun, and the Yuezhi. Old Chinese even borrowed some words from Indo-European vocabulary that survive into the modern day. The clearest example is the word honey. In Mandarin today, honey is mi, deriving from Middle Chinese miet, from Old Chinese mit, ultimately tracing back to medu of Proto-Indo-European, with cognates in other Indo-European languages like madu in Sanskrit or metu in ancient Greek. Also, there is no debate that Indo-European speakers, most probably carrying steppe ancestry, was living in modern-day Western China well into recorded history. The departure of one of the last Indo-European speakers from China, the Yuezhi, is deeply linked to the politics of Han Dynasty. The diplomat Zhang Qian was originally tasked with the mission to search for the Yuezhi who left the Gansu corridor due to Xiongnu aggression, to convince these people to form a military alliance with Han against the Xiongnu. While there are still contentious issues, specifically regarding the genetics of Tarim mummies and the questions of bronze technology being independently discovered or imported into China, I will not dwell too much into these issues as they do not directly affect the question of Qijia genetics. But coming back to Qijia, to claim that the people of this culture has steppe-derived genetics is quite problematic. You see, Qijia culture is a 4,000-year-old culture centered near today's Lanzhou in the southern part of the Hexi corridor. While this corridor has long been a conduit of cultural and genetic exchanges between the East and the West, the bronze work of Qijia definitely displays some influences from Central Asia. The genetic and cultural affinity of the people of Qijia, however, tells a very different story. To trace the story of Qijia, we first need to go back to around 7,000 years ago. Along the middle reaches of the Yellow River, a group of people descended from the ancient Northern East Asian ANEA population would develop a culture centered on millet farming so intensively that their population size and geographical span expanded and contracted depending on climatic sustainability or suitability of millet farming. We call this culture the Yangshao culture, and its inhabitant, the Yellow River millet farmers. Around 5,000 years ago, climatic changes increased the rainfall belt further west into the Qinghai, Gansu area, allowing these Yangshao people to expand into these previously unexploited regions. One of the results of this migration is the Majiayao culture. Unfortunately, this greening of the arc of eastern steppe did not last long, and the rainfall retreated, making subsistence relying entirely on agriculture impossible, forcing the inhabitants to adapt to a semi-pastoral lifestyle by 2000 BC as Majiayao culture transitions into the Qijia culture. This archaeological evidence correlates with linguistic evidence as well. Modern linguistics generally agree that the speakers of Sino-Tibetan language family originates in areas corresponding to the Yangshao culture, with Majiayao culture being the splitting off of the Tibetic branch from the Sinitic branch of this language family. A split that possibly reflects a change in Majiayao culture adapting to a semi-pastoral lifestyle, allowing its inhabitants to eventually exploit the Tibetan highlands. But truth be told, cultural and linguistic evidence are secondary evidences, as not a single genetic change is actually required for cultural or linguistic diffusion. The best evidence to connect the people of Qijia to Majiayao back to the Yangshao will still require genetic evidence, and genetic evidence we have. The Morgul Cemetery complex of the Qijia culture yielded 55 samples which were tested for mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome haplogroups. The majority of mitochondrial DNA haplogroups were D, C, A, and F, accounting for 60% of the sample, all of which were East Asian related haplogroup. Of the males in the test, only 6 were successful in providing Y chromosome result, and all 6 were haplogroup O3A2C. This Y chromosome haplogroup O3 is an ancient lineage that formed some 35,000 years ago before the split of ancient Northern East Asian population from ancient Southern East Asian population. As such, this haplogroup is common not only in Sino-Tibetan speaking groups, with up to 50% in Han Chinese, but were also common in other East and Southeast Asian speaking groups. 40% in Manchus, Mongols, Korea, and Vietnam, up to 30% in Philippines, and between 10 to 20% for Japanese and Malays. In fact, this paper, along with the 2022 publication, identified the people of Qijia as representative of the ancient Qiang people in both genetics and geographical distribution recorded in Chinese history. But since this video is getting rather long and the scientific evidence pointing towards an East Asian ancestry of the Qijia people unequivocal, I do not see it necessary to elaborate on the historical records of the Qiang. Long story short, the animosity and bloody history between the Qiang and the Shang and the subsequent Qiang-descended Zhou fills the first 1,500 years of the 3,500 years of Chinese written historiography. Perhaps in another video I'll address this issue, but one thing is for sure, the Qijia is not steppe-derived in genetics.